and welcome back to Eclipsing History. I'm Peter Limbert.
And I'm Amilcar Chalou. We are historians at Bowling Green State University. A couple of weeks after the April 8 eclipse, the Bowling Green Middle School organized Astroexpo, a science fair about astronomy and the eclipse experience.
In this episode, we explore how children reacted to eclipses, both in history and in the present. As historians, we're always fascinated by who's in the historical record and who's not, who speaks for their own words and who doesn't. Several descriptions of social reactions to eclipses describe what children did throughout history and in the present.
But we rarely hear directly from the children. It's often about them, kind of like the Lorax, who speaks for the trees.
I'm the Lorax. I speak for the trees.
Unlike trees, children speak a lot. With that in mind, we went to the Astroexpo and asked children questions about their eclipse experience.
Stay with us to hear to what they said, and wait for some sound effects that they added at their own will.
The eclipse was fun because you got to look at the sun, and the moon was covering it. That was the best part. The eclipse was nice because you got to take off your glasses and it looked like there's a ring. It was very cool.
What I felt during the solar eclipse was very passionate and happy and very surprised that could happen.
What did you feel during the 2024 eclipse?
Excited.
Was it cool?
Yeah.
So the eclipse, it gets really dark during totality. Everywhere you look looks like a sunset actually, and you'll actually feel a significant drop in the temperature.
What did you feel during the 2024 eclipse?
Good.
And what was your favorite thing about the eclipse?
When the sky was dark and the moon was very covering the sun, it looked neat and cool.
We also asked them what their favorite part of the eclipse was. And surprisingly, they all focused on one thing: totality.
I felt cold. My favorite thing was totality, when I could not see most of the sun except for a small outer ring. It looked white and pretty.
My favorite thing was totality when it went dark.
I watched the solar eclipse when it reached totality with my family.
My favorite thing about the eclipse was the diamond ring.
When it was fully time.
Few of them had interesting descriptions of what the world around them looked like. These will be useful as we study them in the future.
We stayed outside and then we watched it. And my sister got bored.
It was dark and gray, and it felt really weird because it felt like it was mid-afternoon and there was a rainstorm coming with how gray it was outside. But then when you looked outside, you could see the corona and you could see the solar flares, and it was really cool.
My favorite thing about the eclipse was that everything around me was dark and every animal stopped doing stuff and went to bed.
These kids' answers that we collected in the Astroexpo really contrast with coverage of children in the 19th century and even the early 20th. For that, we checked Chronicling America. It's this really cool website with historical newspapers from across the country and across centuries.
I love Chronicling America. I highly recommend everybody to check it out. It's fantastic. So, what did you find?
Well, as early as 1865, we have descriptions of eclipses that include talk about children. There's a clear pattern to them. The early reports up to about 1900 talk that children reacted with fear and astonishment. We actually read this description of the total eclipse in 1869 by the Evansville Journal that said, "Chickens went to roost, children playing in the street ran home affrighted."
Affrighted. That's such a cool word.
Yeah,
Have you heard that?
I've never heard of the word affrighted before. That might be something that didn't survive the 19th century. But here's another term, this time for the New York in 1900, said, "People are nervous and excited while children cling to their mothers in fright."
Fright again. I wonder if children experience only fear, or maybe fear was projected onto them.
Right. We really don't know what children thought or even said until the mid-20th century, and it's clear that newspapers tend to associate not only fear, but also ignorance to them. This little note, for instance, was repeated frequently in many newspapers, sometimes among other humorous anecdotes. It reads, "A primary school class being up for examination, the teacher asked, 'Now children, what makes an eclipse?' All silent with much facial twisting, as if to screw out the mystery. At last a carroty-headed urchin, shutting tightly his eyes with evident determination to do or die, jerked out at the top of his voice the singularly true but inappropriate answer, 'God Almighty?' There was a profound pause.
Carroty-headed urchin. I could not make that up. Well, that's an interesting one. I think this is coming at the same time that, there's a big discussion about religion and science, lots of confrontation. What's the age of the Earth or evolution? I wonder, though, when is that we first hear directly from children?
Well, the first instance that we can find is from 1949 in Washington, D.C.'s Evening Star paper. It's about a lunar eclipse. It narrates school children going to the Naval Observatory and making observations in their telescope. A 10-year-old boy named Pete said that the telescope view was different than what he expected. Carolyn, who's age 14, said that it was interesting, and the reporter stressed that children had very matter-of-factly reactions.
Wow, interesting indeed. Quite a few of our kids in the Astroexpo today also answer matter-of-factly.
Yeah, actually, and they answered very matter-of-factly, but there's also some excitement to it. Also in the Evening Star, but this time a solar eclipse in 1963, a reporter interviewed school children and their teachers. Carol, who was age 12, said, "I felt excited when I saw it."
It's interesting that these couple of articles in which we have actually interviews of children, they replied in ways that are not that different from the kids in 2024, much less fear and more about, excitement and things like that.
Right. And when we asked children, their responses were very upfront and factual. I'd like to know how much more about how children reacted to eclipses farther back in the past, especially before recording technology. There are a lot of fears that are projected onto them, but we don't know very much about how they actually felt.
Time to wrap up. And speaking of how they feel, I would like to play my favorite testimony. This boy was definitely annoyed by streetlights. Let's listen to it.
My favorite thing about the eclipse was the climax building up to it, because afterwards the street lights came on.
Thank you. Do you want to do another question? Or? Yeah, sure. Sure? Did the eclipse live to its hype?
No, it did not, because the street lights came on. If it didn't, yes it would.
What would be your advice to someone watching an eclipse in 2099?
Don't go to somewhere with street lights.
Streetlights automatically turn on when it becomes nighttime in a lot of modern cities today. So it's definitely not something that they would have seen in the 19th century or even the early 20th.
Yeah, no, and today we have all this stuff about light pollution, urban lights, and wildlife. But anyway, that may be for another podcast or maybe another season.
Yep, so we hope you enjoyed these testimonies. We wanted to give a big thank you to the Bowling Green School District for the Astroexpo, and particularly we wanted to thank Miss Melanie Ferguson, an 8th grade science teacher who made a place for us at the fair. So thank you, and thank you all for watching.
Landon Sina composed the original music for the podcast. Ohio Humanities supported the project. Check bgsu.edu/eclipsing history for additional content and all the season.